This content is not suitable for children and may contain depictions of violence.
Hi Islanders, tonight we go back to 1949 in a case that shocked the world. So grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. This is True Crime Island, another true crime podcast. So I hope you're all doing well in these uncertain times. As I said, tonight we go to the UK, back more than 70 years for a truly shocking case. And one that reminds me that life can be snuffed out in the blink of an eye. References tonight is from the Daily News New York, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Boston Globe, the History of British Serial Killing by David Wilson, crimeandinvestigation.co.uk and crimelibrary.com, which you may notice not many UK newspapers there. That's because they weren't really allowed to report too much on what went on during the case. So the main character tonight is an Englishman, John George Haigh. He was born on the 29th of July 1909 in Stamford, Lincolnshire, to 40-year-old John Robert Haigh and 39-year-old Emily. The family then moved to Leeds, West Yorkshire. The Haigh household was a strictly religious household. Haigh's parents belonged to the Plymouth Brethren, which is a Protestant-based religion with the belief that the Bible is the supreme authority for church doctrine and practice over and above any other source of authority. The household didn't celebrate Christmas, and this denied young Haigh some of the niceties that other kids got. Now, as a kid, Haigh liked to fuck around a bit, not in the literal sense, more in the cruel joke and animal cruelty sense. It's reported that he once chased a piglet until it died of exhaustion, and that he pulled a chair out from an elderly organist, causing him to fall and injure himself. He was quite musical, and apparently he would only play the piano with gloves on to protect his delicate fingers. He had recurring dreams of Christ bleeding on the cross, and as his mum analysed dreams, she told him that the wrath of God was present for the boy. He felt he must perform acts of humiliation on himself, taking the Bible literally, and would do the Bear Grylls of drinking his own piss. Improvise, adapt and overcome. At school, he found he had a talent for forging signatures and used this talent to get out of class. How many of you did that? Anyway, now, Haigh liked to dress well. He was very personable when required. He had piercing blue eyes. He had the knack of being able to make people feel comfortable around him, and he presented himself as a charming and well-to-do or dapper. He married a Leeds waitress, Betty Hamer, in 1934. Later in the year, he went to jail for 4 months for fraud, and this won't be the first time. He got busted selling cars that didn't exist. He'd been working in a garage, but that just didn't give him the money and lifestyle he thought he deserved. When he got out of jail, it didn't take him long before he was back inside after being done for a fraudulent stock scheme. Although he had little interest in sex, Betty got pregnant and had the child while Haigh was doing one of those stints in jail. She had the kid but adopted it out never to see it again and left Haigh for good. Probably a good idea. In 1936, Haigh had a job for a few months working at an amusement parlour owned by a Donald McSwan. He was chauffeur for Donald and helped maintain the amusement machines. It's here he would get to know William McSwan, Donald's son. But again, Haigh couldn't help himself. He quit his job to con more people out of their money. He set himself up as a fake solicitor, sold fake shares and bonds, but got busted because he spelled the name Guildford without a D on his business card, and a canny potential investor noticed this and called the police, telling them that a real solicitor wouldn't make such a mistake. I mean, Islanders, it's just not the same without the D, is it? He got busted again and sent away for 4 years this time. In 1940, on release from prison, he again went back to his favourite possession of conning people out of their money. In 1941, he again got busted and spent another 18 months in jail. Now, while in prison, he got a few tips from some of the other inmates. Basically, when you want to pull a con or some sort of fraudulent scheme, you got to show your face. Now, if you're just robbing a bank or a jewellery shop, you go in with a gun and a mask, rob the place, and then run off. With a con, you have to get up close and personal. It's also usually a longer game where you find a mark and do whatever it is, your scheme or your con, but then you're left with witnesses who will be able to describe you to a T. Now, this might work for a while, but eventually you're going to have a lot of people looking for you, and you're going to get caught, as Haigh had experienced. That is, unless the mark disappears. Now, this got Haigh thinking while inside. If he could work out a way to get rid of his victims after he conned them, then he had very little chance of getting caught. He did read a few books inside, chemistry books and law books. Now, he mistakenly thought that if you could dispose of a body and it could not be found, then you couldn't get busted. He thought corpus delicti, which in legal terms means the body of evidence, well, he thought it meant that if you didn't have a body, meaning a human body, that you could not be convicted. And in his case, you couldn't be convicted of murder. He also read about French serial killer George Alexander Surette, and while inside, he concocted a plan that if he could dissolve a body in acid, that he'd be immune to prosecution. The reason he kept going back inside was because his victims lived to tell the tale. Now, he was able to get hold of some H2SO4 or sulfuric acid from one of the jail workshops, and he got field mice from other prisoners that were allowed to work outside the prison fence during the day. He experimented dissolving the field mice in the acid as he had a grand plan for when he could finally be released. On his release, Haigh rented a basement area at 79 Gloucester Road, London, SW7, and if you look on Google Maps, it's now the site of a patisserie. The building there is actually now incorrectly numbered as 77, probably to keep true crime fans away and point them towards the KFC next door. Anyway, in his basement, he started to gather the tools of his new trade: rubber gloves, a thick rubber coat, a war-era gas mask, a couple of old oil drums, and by setting up a fake company, he was able to get hold of sulfuric acid. Now, by chance, in the summer of 1945, Haigh ran into William McSwan, the son of his old employer. Now, that was at the Goat Tavern in Kensington. I think that's still there too. Over several days they met there, and Haigh found that William's job was to collect rents from his parents' properties. Now, William made quite a good living out of this, and Haigh wanted some of the action. In conversation, the maintenance of the pinball machines at the McSwan's amusement arcades came up, and Haigh told William that he had a factory area that he could fix the pinball machines in. Haigh invited William to come and have a look at the workshop, and he agreed. On the 6th of September 1944, Haigh and William went to the basement workshop, and as William turned away, Haigh hit him over the head with a kosh or a blackjack, which is a thick, heavy stick or bar used as a weapon. I love the words they use: kosh, blackjack. He then dismembered the body and put it in one of the oil drums. He filled the drum with acid, and then he met up with William's parents, Donald and Amy, to tell them that William had left for Scotland to avoid conscription in the army. He then took over William's house and started collecting the rents for the McSwans. I mean, this guy's fucking good, isn't he? Now, it took a couple of days to dissolve most of William. Haigh then tipped the sludge that was left into a drain in the workshop. Now, as Sanger, one of the learned chemists on the island, will tell you, not only will there be sludge if you try to dissolve a body in acid, but there will probably be other bits left over. I don't mean to say she's tried dissolving bodies in acid, but I do try to keep on a good side. Hi, Sanger. Haigh, being an excellent forger, sent the McSwans letters that he forged in William's handwriting. Now, Haigh, he's a professional con man. He looks well dressed and has this confident air about him. The McSwans were sure Haigh was doing the best for William and for them as well. Now, Haigh was able to live quite a good lifestyle collecting the rents for the McSwans, but he wanted more. He wanted the properties as well. In July of 1945, the war in Europe was over and winding down, and the McSwans were wondering why William hadn't come home. He finally told them that William was waiting for them in his Gloucester Road workshop and offered to take them there for a surprise visit. Now, first he took Donald there. Now, once inside the workshop, he hit him over the head with his cosh. Then later that day, he took Amy there and killed her the same way. He had 2 barrels with acid and dissolved both of them over the next couple of days as well. He then let it be known that they'd gone to America. He was able to forge a power of attorney document and take possession of all their property, and he sold it. He then moved into the Onslow Court Hotel. That's at 108A Queen's Gate, Kensington. It's now known as the Kensington Hotel. Now, at the time, this place housed mainly older, hoity-toity or well-off, snobby residents. I love the way the papers describe the residents as hoity-toity. What a word. Now, Haigh stood out there a bit because he was under 40 years old, not the 60 plus like most of the hoity-toities. He was living off the proceeds of the McSwans, but this wasn't going to last forever, and he did gamble a little bit. So he had to look for new money. Haigh then moved into his workshop at 2 Leopold Road, Crawley in West Sussex. Now, it's about 28 miles or 45 kilometres south of London. While reading the paper, Haigh came across an ad for the sale of a property by 52-year-old Dr. Archie Henderson, formerly of the Royal Army Medical Corps, and his wife Rose, a former beauty queen. Haigh offered the Hendersons more money than the property that was worth, and this got them very interested. Now, the sale ultimately wouldn't go through, but it gave Haigh time to work his way into their lives. He got to know them quite well, as he did with all his victims. He used their shared love of music to get close to them, although at first Rosalie was pretty wary of him. Eventually, they accepted Haigh as a friend and saw him as a successful businessman. At one stage, Rosalie invited Haigh to their house to play the piano for their housewarming party. It's here that Haigh finds and steals Dr. Henderson's revolver. In February 1948, though, Haigh needed money, so he devised a plan to lure the Hendersons into his new workshop at 2 Leopold Road, Crawley. The Hendersons were staying at the Metropole Hotel in Brighton at the time, and he discussed with Dr. Henderson a business opportunity that they could work out of his workshop and that he should come up to Crawley to discuss it further. On the 12th of February 1948, he took Dr. Henderson to the workshop, and as soon as he got the chance, Haigh shot him in the back of the head with the revolver he'd stolen from him previously. So then he went back to the Metropole Hotel. He spoke to Rosalie and told her that her husband had become ill and she should come with him to the workshop immediately. Well, Rosalie let her guard down a bit and didn't think twice about going with Haigh if her husband was ill. As soon as he got her in the workshop, he shot her in the back of the head as well. As before, he stripped them of all their valuables, stuff like rings, watches, jewellery. He even got Archie's gold cigarette lighter. and then he put the bodies into oil drums and dissolved them in acid. Now this location, it didn't have a proper drain like the Gloucester Road location, so he couldn't just tip the sludge into it and have it end up in the Thames. He decided to use a corner of the workshop's yard to empty the barrels. Now Rosalie's brother Arnold Berlin started asking around about where his sister and her husband were. Haigh tried to reassure him that they'd gone away to sort out their marriage, but he just didn't buy it. So Haigh set about forging letters to Arnold from Rosalie. Now, because Haigh had got to know the couple so well, he was able to make the letters pretty credible by including familiar phrases and personal stories. He wrote that they'd gone to South Africa. Well, actually he fled there after Archie had performed an illegal abortion. Now this got Arnold off Haigh's back, and because it looked like they'd fled to South Africa because they'd done something illegal, the brother was hesitant to follow it up any further, especially with police. Now, this Haigh is pretty bloody good, isn't he? As with the McSwan's assets, Haigh forged documents to take control of everything and sell it all off. It only took 6 months for Haigh to need a new victim, as he'd spent most of the Hendersons' wealth. As Haigh was living at the Onslow Court Hotel in Kensington, he had ample opportunity to listen into the conversations in the dining room. Now one night, wealthy widow, Olive, Henrietta, Helen, Olivia, Robarts Durand-Deacon, how's that for a name? Well, Olive was having dinner with a friend, Mrs. Birrin, and they discussed an idea to make plastic fingernails. Now Haigh saw that as an opportunity and invited himself to sit with the ladies and discuss it further. He told Olive that he had a workshop that would be perfect to make these fingernails and offered to take her there and show her around. I'll get that out. On the 17th of February 1949, Haigh organised to meet Olive outside the Army and Navy stores in Victoria Street, London. He picked her up in his car and drove to his workshop in Crawley. Now, this workshop wasn't anything pretty. It was pretty small, and to get to it, you had to walk through what could only be described as a very filthy yard with shit piled up everywhere. So the sight of the impeccably dressed Olive, done up like a dog's dinner, wearing all the rings, jewellery, fur coat and pearls, walking through this shitty yard on the way to the workshop, would have been so out of place. But Haigh's good at what he does. No one seemed to notice. Now when he got her inside, he distracted her with a piece of red paper which he told her would be the basis of the plastic fingernails. As she studied it, probably wondering what a piece of red paper was going to do, Haigh shot her in the back of the head with the Henderson stolen revolver. Again, he stripped her of her valuables and dissolved her in acid. He then went for a poached egg at the old ancient Prior's tea shop. That's still there. Go and get a poached egg. Now, with all of his prior victims, Haigh was able to assure anyone who noticed them missing that they were fine and had gone away. He was able to do this as he got to know them so well that he could make up believable stories. Now, Olive was noticed missing straight away. Haigh had made sure to meet her away from the Onslow Court Hotel, that's at the Army and Navy stores in Victoria Street, London, so that no one would see him go off with her. Olive's friend, Mrs. Constance Lane, asked Haigh on his return to the hotel how the trip with Olive was to the workshop. Haigh told Mrs. Lane that he waited for her at the Army and Navy stores, but she failed to turn up. As Olive was still missing the following morning, this really started to worry Mrs. Lane, as Olive wasn't the type of person to really ever leave the hotel. Haigh returned to the workshop to empty the sludge which had been Olive, but it looks like it needed a few more days to dissolve completely. He also went to sell her jewellery and took her fur coat to the cleaners. I guess that might have had a bit of blood on it. A couple of days later, Mrs. Lane spoke to Haigh and told him that she was going to go and report Olive missing to the police. Now, this must have been a bit of a sphincter-clenching moment for Haigh, with his supreme confidence and wanting to probably be in some control of the situation. He offered to take Mrs. Lane to the Chelsea police station himself. Now, look, I've got some reports where it was Haigh's idea to go to the police with her, but I'm thinking this version of events is more correct. Now, this is where Haigh comes undone. They speak to Woman Police Sergeant Alexandra Lambourne. She was immediately suspicious of the charming and smooth Haigh, so after he and Mrs. Lane left, she did a bit of a background check on him. Lambourne uncovered Haigh's extensive criminal past, and she ended up organising a search at the workshop in Crawley. Here they found all of Haigh's equipment, the rubber coats, gas masks, empty jugs that had contained the acid, and that's not all. They also found a recently fired revolver, ration books in the name of the McSwans, and a dry cleaning ticket for Olive's fur coat. Police went back to the Onslow Court Hotel and asked Haigh to come downtown to assist with their investigation. Now eventually, and I think I know why he did this, he thought he was going to get away with it, he confessed to murdering Olive Durand-Deacon. He told police, "I've destroyed her with acid. You'll find the sludge that remains at Leopold Road. Every trace is gone. How can you prove murder if there is no body?" He would also go on to confess that he also murdered the McSwans and the Hendersons. Now, a further search of the Crawley location found bloodstains in the workshop and a hat pin at the bottom of an oil drum. They found where Haigh had disposed of the sludge, and here they found 28 pounds of fat, a foot, 3 gallstones, and a set of dentures. The dentures would be identified as Olive Durand-Deacon's. I think it was her gallstones as well. Now, during his interrogation, Haigh told police that he killed each of his victims to drink their blood. Now, he also told them he killed 3 other people. Now, this was dismissed as being part of a plan to get out of the death penalty and so he could be sent to a mental hospital. On the 18th of July 1949, 4,000 people crowded into the town of Lewes. I know I'm going to get someone to say I'm not pronouncing Lewes right, it's Lewes or something. Anyway, hoping to get a seat in the court for the Haigh trial for the murder of Olive Durand-Deacon. Now, the law at the time meant he would only be tried for 1 count of murder, well, at least at a time. Haigh had no money for a lawyer, so he did a deal with a newspaper to provide them with an exclusive story if they paid for his defence. Haigh pleaded not guilty. He relied on the defence of insanity. Now, when he said he drank the blood of his victims, he was portrayed in the media as a vampire. He hoped this would prove he was insane. However, it was found that because he tried to cover up his crimes, he was sane enough to know that what he'd done was wrong. Also, he had inquired on how easy it would be to get out of the Broadmoor mental facility where he would be sent if found insane. He'd asked the investigating officer when he was arrested, "Tell me, frankly, what are the chances of anyone being released from Broadmoor?" So, they saw this as one of the ways he was planning on avoiding the gallows by hoping to go down the insanity defence route. It took only 15 minutes for the jury to come to a consensus. Haigh was guilty. The judge asked if he had anything to say for himself. He cocked his head and said, "Nothing at all." The judge donned a black cap and sentenced Haigh to die. On August the 6th, 1949, at Wandsworth Prison, John George Haigh was executed. Now, geez, that's pretty fast. That's just 2 weeks after the trial. They didn't fuck around back then. A death mask was made of Haigh, and he had bequeathed his clothing to Madame Tussauds' Chamber of Horrors, where a wax figure of him was erected, and I think it's still there today. He sent instructions that it must always be kept in perfect condition, the trousers creased, the hair parted, and his shirt cuffs showing. So, Islanders, what a crazy case. In the space of about 5 years, this conman killed at least 6 people. He didn't do it for some impulse or bloodlust to murder. He did it to maintain some sort of high social life, one he didn't want to work for. What is amazing is that the people he killed were living quite comfortably on the assets that they had, but Haigh could only survive for a very, very short time on those assets once he was able to transfer it to himself. Now, he was a gambler and liked to spend money, but just think, if he'd been able to manage his finances better, he probably wouldn't have had to kill anyone after the McSwans, and surely not after the Hendersons, and he would have got away undetected. The people he murdered were certainly going to be missed by someone, but he was able to deflect suspicion quite successfully. That, of course, is until he knocked off old Olive Durand-Deacon, whose friend Mrs. Lane contacted police. Now, luckily, the officer she talked to gave a shit enough to contact Scotland Yard and get a background check done on Haigh, who she really thought was as dodgy as fuck. Now, Haigh had, as a lot of serial killers do, become a bit sloppy in his methods and just left too much evidence behind. I mean, these common and con women, they're some of the scariest villains around. Their victims let them into their lives as friends, business partners or partners. They gain their trust and then boom, fuckalunga. You're dead and all your shit's gone. Often the perp does this under an assumed name, but Haigh did this in the open using his real name, except for the times when he set up dodgy businesses, but basically he didn't try to hide his identity. I think he got what he deserved, and it's good that his insanity defence didn't work out for him. He was 40 when he died, and if he got out to when he was, say, 60 or so, I'm sure he would have just gone back to his old ways, the only way he knew how to live. Imagine if he'd put his intelligence and efforts into something worthwhile. Now, what's really scary is there are people out there just like Haigh right now, and with that thought, I'll end the show. So that is the end of the show. If you want to support the island, there are links in the description for Patreon, PayPal and merch. Please feel free to comment, like and subscribe. I've been your host, Cambo. You've been watching True Crime Island. And as I always say, don't forget to delete your browser history. Good night. Boom, fuckalunga.